Sparkle Stegosaurus here. For the past 11 years now, I have done a year-end movie recap where I rank each new release movie I saw that year, and I highlight some of my favorites. Last year was my 10th anniversary, and Godzilla Minus One took the crown, because how could it not? That movie is epic. On my 11th year though, I thought I would do something a little bit different and make a video, which I've never done before, and do like a little mini review of each of the films. So I bought one of those movie passes this year, and I saw close to 50 films, and most of those were in the theater no less, which is crazy. I like to rank my movies on a scale of good, bad, and mediocre. That is a little Fury Road reference for you Mad Max fans out there. And since I have so many movies to cover, I'm just gonna discuss each one briefly. So let's get started. First movie we're talking about is Dune Part 2. I really enjoyed the first Dune movie, so I had pretty high expectations for this one. I never read the books, I don't know anything about the source material, I'm not sure how close it is to that story, but the movies are really cool. I like the visuals, I love the cinematography, I love the sound design of these movies. It has a really cool soundtrack, they have really good actors playing all the roles. I just think it's an epic film to watch, and I do think it really benefits from being seen in IMAX. Biggest possible screen, best way to see that movie for sure.
You are not prepared for what is to come.
Roleplay. I barely remember this movie outside of Kaylee Cuoco being in it, and I think it's essentially a ripoff of like True Lies. She's been kind of redeeming herself for me in various projects since The Big Bang Theory, which I didn't really care for, but this wasn't really one of them for me.
I'm sorry.
Next up, we have Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. It was pretty ambitious for DC to tackle this storyline, and I was happy to see that they gave it 3 movies so it had time to breathe. It's kind of crazy to think that DC's been doing these animated films for such a long time now. I think they started back in like 2010, and this sort of acts as like a big finale to all that stuff. Now everything's being rebooted into the James Gunn verse, and that includes the animated stuff. So whatever comes out now, I guess, is gonna be part of whatever it is that he's doing. So this movie was kind of a way to cap all that off, and this was the first part of it. I enjoyed Part 1 the most, and I think that's just because it focused on a single character, which was the Flash, and I felt like it had the most complete story. A lot of times with these animated movies, if you hadn't read the comic book, sometimes the story can be sort of confusing because you're not familiar with the story, and they kind of act like you've already read the book, and this one didn't feel like it did that, so I appreciated it.
You got that right.
Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, what a freaking title that is. When this came out, it got compared negatively to Minus One, and listen, they're both Godzilla films, okay? But this one was made more to mirror the Showa era Godzilla, and it's really not trying to be like the original. The Showa era stuff was really more for kids, it wasn't trying to be super serious. I think it's fun. It's over the top, it's insanely goofy, it's pretty light on the story. It had a lot of cool stuff in it. Big monster fist fights. It actually had scenes that were just the monsters, which we haven't really seen a lot of before. It was like if 48 Hours was a kaiju movie, you know, or Lethal Weapon. There's some really funny scenes, and they really turned Kong and Godzilla into actual characters, which I appreciated.
They don't have to like each other, they just have to work together.
Damsel. This is another one of those trapped in a location movies, except this one's about Eleven from Stranger Things getting tossed into a dragon's lair and she has to escape. There's a really obvious twist to this movie. It's really not much to say about it. You know, it's that actress running around in a cave, and it's really dark.
Welcome, princess.
The Fall Guy. I saw this purely because of the director, and I'll only tell you, I wasn't disappointed. I might call it the perfect date movie, honestly. It's basically a rom-com action film. It has something for everybody. Plus, it's a love letter to stunt people, and I can definitely get behind that. Ryan Gosling's charismatic in the movie. It's just a fun film overall. I recommend you check it out if you like action movies.
And I'm open to that in a safer environment.
The Contestant. I can't show the full poster for this movie because it's got a naked dude on it. But let me tell you, this is a harrowing documentary about a guy who spent months trying to live off of prizes that he won while he was locked in an apartment. Honestly, it's a little difficult to watch, but it's really fascinating, and it kind of opens up to the lengths that people are willing to go just for television. It's scary, kind of, in a lot of ways.
If you put what we're about to show you in a movie, I doubt anybody would believe it.
Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 2. This movie was honestly just a giant mess for me. I had only the slightest grasp of what was happening. And like I said before, DC usually makes these films in a way where they're understandable without having to have read the comic books, but I just don't feel like this was one of those movies. I didn't really know what was going on. They didn't do a good job of explaining the new characters all that well, and I felt like I needed to read a Wikipedia to get what was happening, to be honest.
What have I done?
Roadhouse. There was such a big stink made about this movie by the director and the actors that I thought maybe we had like a hidden gem on our hands, but that's really just not the case. Like, I like Doug Liman, I like Jake Gyllenhaal. The movie's just kind of sloppy and it's generic. I mean, it's a remake of a movie that's freaking hilarious. I mean, it's not trying to be a comedy movie, but it kind of is because it's so goofy and over the top. And this is like trying to do that, but you can't really do that. It just kind of has to happen organically. The big bad guy is played by Conor McGregor. I don't know, man, that dude is just in another movie. Jake does his best to be like likable and all that stuff. I don't know, his character just doesn't have a personality overall. He's just kind of like quippy, generic hero guy, and I'm over that.
Once Knox is on the job, it's over, baby.
Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Honestly, I had zero interest in this as I felt that War of the Planet of the Apes did a good job of wrapping up the story, and Matt Reeves wasn't involved. He's off in Batman land, so I had some pretty low expectations for this one, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. It managed to be a worthy sequel to those other films. It introduced some cool new story elements. It kind of built upon the world. Plus, they introduced some cool new characters. They're intriguing, and I want to see where the story goes. MoviePass, MovieCrash. It's kind of ironic for me to be talking about this because earlier in the video I mentioned I got one of those MoviePasses this year. When MoviePass originally came out, my first question was, how does this make money? And the answer is, it doesn't, and the documentary kind of explains why that is, and it's pretty interesting. It was a huge disaster, but it has a quasi-happy ending to it. It's on HBO, and I recommend you check it out.
I went to the movie theater 428 times.
Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga. This one hurts. Fury Road is one of my all-time favorite movies, but Furiosa honestly just plays like a bunch of backstory ideas that they had written for Fury Road, but then they like decided to shoehorn them into a 2.5-hour movie. The action scenes aren't even really that impressive. The story seems to focus more on Chris Hemsworth's new character over Furiosa herself. Furiosa barely talks in the entire film. I think she has like 30 lines in the movie. Like, they got a great actress to play her. At first I was like, I don't know if Anna Taylor-Joy could pull this off. She could pull it off. It's just the movie thinks that Chris Hemsworth's character is so awesome that he deserves the center stage, and I think that really hurt the film. Instead of doing a prequel movie, I really think they just should push the story forward and focus on what happens after Fury Road. Lover, Stalker, Killer. This is another documentary like The Contestant and MoviePass, MovieCrash. I went on a little bit of a documentary spree this year. I find them really interesting, especially when they have subject matters like this one. So this one's about a dude. He meets someone on an online dating app, and things go very poorly. There's a twist in here I definitely didn't see coming, and I appreciate that because I usually see twists coming. And the story that gets you to that twist is like a PSA on the dangers of dating apps. It's crazy. I think it's on Netflix. You should check it out.
And I was like, oh my God, yes, I'm in.
Longlegs. So this one kicked off a series of strong horror offerings for this year. I saw so many horror movies this year, and to be honest with you, most of them were pretty good. This one was cool because I went in completely blind. I didn't see a trailer. I didn't know anything about the plot. All I saw was a poster for it, and I knew that Nicolas Cage was in it. So I would describe this movie as like X-Files part satanic horror, and it's all Nicolas Cage because Nicolas Cage is Longlegs and he makes the movie a lot of fun. He really does a lot with that role. He's not in it a ton, but he's got that sort of Anthony Hopkins Silence of the Lambs thing going on. You will remember the minutes that he is on camera. It's a slow burn, you know, but I enjoyed the encroaching sense of dread. I like when movies pull that off really well, and Nicolas Cage's performance really levels the film up, I think.
I'll be waiting.
Beverly Hills Cop Axel F. There's been a lot of legacy sequels lately, and to be honest with you, they're either awesome or they're incredibly unnecessary, and I'd say this one's pretty unnecessary. Eddie Murphy is clearly having fun. I think he's trying to make up for his like bizarrely serious performance in Beverly Hills Cop 3 because he was mad at John Landis and he wanted to be all serious and stuff, and so he's not as comedic in that film. I don't need to see him be therapy on screen, to be honest with you. Eddie Murphy's still funny. He did that movie My Name is Dolomite, or Dolomite is My Name recently. Well, actually it was 4 or 5 years ago. Time is flying, and that movie's hilarious. This one, I don't know, it just bored me.
You know, this is very embarrassing.
Deadpool and Wolverine. There's really not much I can say about this that hasn't been said already. I think the movie actually did a good job of balancing its humor while telling a story centered around its characters. This was something that the first and the second Deadpool movies were also successful in doing, in my opinion. And I also felt that all the cameos didn't really distract from the story, but instead played into the film's central theme of second chances. I thought that was actually pretty brilliant that they pulled that off. You know, the whole movie was about proving that you could be good. It's super meta, but that's Deadpool's bread and butter. That's what you go to Deadpool for.
I am soaking wet right now.
Borderlands. Maybe I was in a good mood when I saw this movie, I don't know, but I didn't think it was as bad as everyone was saying it was. It's not good, but it wasn't horrible. It just feels like a really, really messy attempt to rip off Guardians of the Galaxy, and then for whatever reason the studio decided to just throw a bunch of money at it. It's kind of like a 2-hour commercial for the Borderlands games. It was just entirely unnecessary. I honestly just went to this because of the cast, and they're the who sold me on it, but to be honest with you, they're all horribly miscast. I mean, in addition to just not being the right age for those characters, they're just not the right fit. Like, I felt like they changed everybody's personalities to match the stylings of that specific person, and that doesn't really work for me. Like, Roland is not Kevin Hart, and like, you already had a voice actor for Claptrap. You didn't need Jack Black. I don't know. Most of y'all didn't like this movie anyway, so.
God, I hate this planet.
Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 3. Man, these movies just got worse, honestly. Like, my eyes glazed over while I was watching this. There's just too much going on. None of it's explained very well. Kevin Conroy's last line might give you a little bit of the feels. He's barely in the movie. He's in it for like 3 seconds. He's not being recruited to save the multiverse like you'd think. I mean, the whole thing was really just a reboot anyway. Like I mentioned before, James Gunn's doing his thing. You know, Creature Commandos came out. That was his first project under his new DC banner that he's doing. We'll see where he takes things, but as far as wrapping things up go, I think the Apocalypse movie that they made years before they rebooted the universe last time, that was better. So, yeah.
I was afraid you were losing your journalistic instincts.
Alien Romulus. Like Planet of the Apes, I went into this with extremely low expectations because, again, this was Disney taking over from Fox. They had never done an Alien movie before, but I was actually pretty surprised. It was riddled with callbacks. Some of them were handled better than others, but there is enough new stuff to enjoy the movie for what it is. It does pay tribute to every corner of the franchise, so I definitely appreciated that. The only fault I had is one very poorly executed cameo, which I think they apparently fixed in the home release, so if you watch it now, you're not gonna see what I saw, and it might look a little bit better. Your mileage may vary on that.
This could be our only ticket out of here.
I saw the TV glow. I watched this movie in an airplane, and honestly, I felt as trapped as the lead character did. I will say that like the concept and the idea behind this is clever. It's all about these two kids and they're trapped and they're really obsessed with this like cheesy 90s show that's a lot like Are You Afraid of the Dark and like kids shows like Nickelodeon stuff from that time period. It's just the execution is just not there. It was hard to watch an entire film where your lead character just mumbles everything. Like I barely can understand what Justice Smith is saying, and I know he could do better because I have seen him in other movies like the Dungeons and Dragons film that came out a couple years ago. I liked him in that. I thought he was funny. This movie, not so much. He just felt disengaged. I guess that was the point of his character. It made me disengaged. So at the end of the day, if he doesn't care, why should I care?
I told myself I made the right choice.
Blink Twice. Another horror movie. Again, like I mentioned, I saw a lot of horror this year. This was one of the ones that I actually enjoyed. That might be divisive for some, but I think as a whole package, it works really well. I think the middle section goes on a little bit too long, but it's also necessary for them to sell the twist of the movie, which I enjoyed quite a bit. If you give this one a chance, I kind of recommend you go in blind, to be honest with you. I think it's better the less you know about it in advance.
Blink twice and I'm in danger.
Speak No Evil. Okay, so this is a remake of a Dutch film, I believe. And let me just say this, sometimes you go into a movie, you know exactly how it's going to play out, but you enjoy it anyway. You enjoy it for the ride and for the craft. It just doesn't matter. That's this movie for me. You know, James McAvoy, he's the lead bad guy in the movie. He's full of dread. And he's clearly having a lot of fun with it. And I think that's what really makes the movie worth watching is that the performance of James McAvoy. He plays crazy and scary and intimidating so well.
I won't call the fun police if you don't.
The 4:30 movie. I once heard a comedian say Kevin Smith is the world's oldest 12-year-old. So that means that fart jokes and inappropriate humor are kind of like his stock and trade, right? The 4:30 movie is a lot more sentimental than most of his films tend to be, and I think he's been that way since his heart attack. Honestly, for me, the movie's just a ripoff of Matinee. Have you guys ever seen Matinee? It stars John Goodman, and it's kind of similar to this movie, except that movie has more stuff going on, and Joe Dante directed it, so it's just a better film. But anyway, the movie's full of a bunch of weird skits, out-of-place rants, and it kind of lost me in this one scene where the kid's talking to this usher, and the usher goes on this unsolicited tirade about how dumb it would be to make Star Wars TV shows, which I guess is supposed to be ironic because the movie takes place in the 80s. Obviously, they made a bunch of Star Wars shows. It just kind of pulled me out of the film. I'm like, Kevin Smith, you've been telling these jokes for decades now. Like, they should be getting better at least, but they're just kind of getting stale, bud.
You disgust me!
Time cut. Sometimes you watch a movie so bad, you wonder how or why it was even made, and that's Time Cut for me. Not only is the twist insanely obvious, but also it's really dumb. Imagine the worst CW level acting you have ever seen, and I would wager that this movie might actually have that beat.
Something really bad starts tonight.
The Wild Robot. Okay, so when I saw this movie in the theater, there was a power outage. And when they booted everything back up, we had no picture, but we could still hear the movie. So I actually didn't get to see the last 15 minutes of the film, but I heard them. And I still enjoyed the movie enough to recommend it to anyone that wants to check it out. I am not a fan of children's animated movies, and this one really got me. The story is really well done. It's got great voice acting in it. I actually do like the animation style. And I enjoyed it so much, I bought the movie when it came out, and I finally got to see the ending of the film. And I still really like it, so highly recommend. Very close to being my #1 movie of the year.
I do not have the programming to be a mother.
Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. I wanted to like this movie. It has some fun parts, but they just don't add up to a good film overall. There are so many villains, and one of them gets lost in the plot, only being remembered at like the very end of the film, while the others are dealt with like way too easily. I think this is what happens when you cram 30 years of sequel ideas into one film. Like, it really just feels like Tim Burton had all these scripts and ideas for a Beetlejuice sequel. I remember at one point he was gonna get in a surf competition in Hawaii, and he just kind of rammed them all together into one script, had all these notes laying around everywhere, and then finally he decided that he was gonna cobble them together into one story, and this is what we got. To be honest with you, it's kind of a lot like the Furiosa movie. It just came later than it really needed to, and it was a movie we didn't need. Piece by piece. All right, so when you have a MoviePass like I do and you literally go every single week, there's always gonna be an off week where you're like, I don't know what to see. Well, we decided to see Piece by Piece. So it's a weird documentary. It's about a guy named Pharrell Williams. Most of you probably know who he is. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't know who he was, but I thought his story was really interesting, and the choice to do the movie entirely in Lego makes it kind of novel, and honestly, it fits the guy's personality really, really well. He's a very quirky, kind of obtuse guy. You kind of want to see him win because he has such a bubbly personality. The movie's a bit too long for my liking, but it's definitely worth watching.
Man, this is gonna be a Lego movie, bruh.
Salem's Lot. I never saw the original, so I didn't see it as the insult that many others did. This was a decently made horror movie, but it fails in the fact that it's just boring. Like, don't be boring. They also offed like the only character that I found interesting kind of early on in the movie, the like doctor character. I just like that actress, so maybe that's why I found her character interesting, but yeah, I was just bored.
Things have gone bad in the lot now.
Late Night with the Devil. 2024 was crushing it so hard with horror movies that I was actively seeking them out, and this was one of the ones that I kept seeing come up, so I had to watch it. It plays like a documentary about a late night TV show host who attempts to summon a demon live on the air. I guess this is quasi based on something that actually happened in the 70s, I believe it was. But anyways, it was shot really well, it was edited really well, and it was a great way to make a low budget horror movie that's really engrossing. Like, it didn't feel low budget, it matched everything from that time period that they were trying to do. Some people might not like it because the ending gets really, really weird, but I think it was really cool. It tied everything together nicely, and it's one of those films where once you're done watching it, you could actually go back and watch it again, and there's gonna be stuff that you totally missed, but that were hinted at earlier in the movie, which I think is cool when they do that.
This isn't about ratings anymore. No one's going anywhere.
Jackpot. I'm supposed to like this because they reference the Ninja Turtles a lot, right? Well, you can't just reference the Ninja Turtles, you gotta tell a story that's really interesting. And I do think this has a core concept that's really clever, but kind of messed around a lot. Like, the cast is cool, they have some good chemistry going on. If they had cut like 15 minutes out of this movie, I honestly think it would have helped quite a bit. It needed to be a little bit tighter. It just felt like the bits went on longer than they should, and you don't want that in a comedy movie.
We're in trouble, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Red One. Ever wanted to watch a movie where The Rock plays Ant-Man? Well, look no further because Red One has got you covered. He can shrink to the size of a toy, which for some reason makes him stronger, and he can turn Hot Wheels into real cars. Yay! This movie plays like an early 2000s comic book film. It has all the same problems that those movies did. It also seems really preoccupied with ripping off the MCU, which isn't really in the spirit of Christmas movies, in my opinion. I think the movie finally lost me when Chris Evans is having a heart-to-heart conversation with his son while they're trapped in giant snow globes. There's some creative ideas here, but the execution is just...
What am I doing here?
Conclave. I fully expected this movie to be boring given its subject matter, but I was pleasantly surprised to find a movie about picking a new pope to be really interesting. It was kind of like a political thriller almost. It's got Ralph Fiennes in it, it's got John Lithgow. It's a great cast, and I like those kind of mystery stories as they slowly unfold, and this one did a really good job with that. Plus, it made you feel the claustrophobia that those people go through when they are picking a new pope. I had no idea what that process was like, so it was cool to get to learn that while watching an interesting movie.
How has this been kept a secret for so long?
Mr. Crocket. This is a bizarre movie about a children's show host who climbs out of TVs through a magical VHS tape, and he basically protects children from bad parental figures. The opening scene is the kind of unhinged stuff that you would want to see from a movie like this with this kind of premise, but the rest of the film never really matches that energy. That opening scene was an R-rated version of Pee Wee Herman or something like that, like a slasher movie, crazy Pee Wee Herman. So the idea is really good, but the budget, I think, is what really let this one down, and I don't know, I just felt like it ran out of steam at the end, all in money. Heretic. We have had a ton of movies recently that are about being trapped in a single location. I wonder why that might be. Joking aside though, Hugh Grant's performance in this as like a controlled psychopath is really a treat to watch. He's like watching a college professor who has a dark streak. He sounds very reasonable, but the stuff that's coming out of his mouth is kind of crazy. Overall, I really like the movie. It's a thriller, it's very suspenseful, and it's about how someone can really manipulate a person with words.
You will witness a miracle.
Wolves. I wanted to like this movie. I think George Clooney and Brad Pitt pair really well together, but the pacing is just off and it really kills my interest in the film. By the end of the movie, you actually kind of feel like the story is just getting started and then it just abruptly ends. And I felt like they were trying to set up all these sequels because they clearly loved these characters, but then Apple, I guess, like announced the sequels before John Watts really committed to making them, and then he got mad and then he's like, no, we're not doing any sequels now. So it's just kind of sit there as this unfinished thing in my opinion, but it was okay.
There's an art to this you may not realize.
The Instigators. Apple TV has become a bit of a sleeper app for me. I've had it for a while now, but I didn't really start diving into it until recently. And I decided to just start checking out whatever they had, and this movie popped up, thought I'd give it a chance. So it's about two thieves who are played by Matt Damon and Casey Affleck, and they're not very good at their job, but they end up teaming up with Matt Damon's therapist to kind of escape the consequences of this heist that they were both a part of that went wrong. And at the beginning of the movie, these guys didn't know each other, they weren't really friends, and then they kind of like bond throughout the course of the film. It's got a lot of humor in it. It's got Ron Perlman. It's got that weird German dude who plays Arlim Zola in the Captain America movies. He shows up in a bunch of stuff. Overall, I thought it was a good time. You know, it's not the most amazing movie, but it's fun to watch.
I got a once-in-a-lifetime score.
Abigail, a cave, a mansion, a house, a basement, a farm, an island paradise, you name it, and there is a movie where someone is trapped there in 2024. Abigail is about a child ballerina who is actually a centuries-old vampire working for a crime boss as a sort of like, I don't know, like a hitman or something like that. A bunch of assassins are tricked into kidnapping her so then she can like trap them in the house and eat them basically. The movie has a clever idea, but for me, the cheesy early 2000s comic book movie thing that happened in the final act sort of ruined it for me. Kind of killed the goodwill that it established. I like the actor that plays the dude who ends up becoming the villain, but sometimes I feel like he's miscast as a bad guy. He was a dude from Legion who played the main guy in that. I don't remember his name off the top of my head. I thought he was okay in The Guest. He's a little bit much in this movie.
I'm sorry about what's gonna happen to you.
Gladiator 2. This might be a bit divisive for some people. It's been 15 years since I watched the original Gladiator movie, and a lot of the criticisms for it were that it was very similar to that film. And I'll just say, like, having not seen it in such a long time, I enjoyed it, honestly. Like, Denzel Washington put in a great performance. There's some kind of crazy action scenes in the movie. It's a little bit long, but it's still a well-made movie. It's a well-acted movie. It's shot really well. Like I said, even if it is similar to the first Gladiator film, if you haven't seen that movie in a while, I don't see why you probably wouldn't like Gladiator 2.
The odds are against you.
The odds are always against me.
The Fire Inside. So this is a sports movie, which I normally don't go for, but like I said, MoviePass, you know, there's gonna be weeks where you go see stuff you wouldn't normally see. And to be honest with you, I ended up really enjoying this movie. It focused on what happened to the girl after she won the gold medal. It wasn't all about her getting it. It's about how her life didn't turn out the way she wanted it to when she thought she had made it in the world. You know, everyone else is getting all these endorsements, she's not, and I thought that made it really unique as far as sports movies go. We don't really get to see that part of people's lives, and it was cool that they were really willing to get down into the nitty-gritty, and honestly, this woman has an amazing story, so I'm glad they got to tell it.
You're the boxer?
Yeah, golden girl.
Sonic the Hedgehog 3. Sonic was never really my cup of tea, but I will say he lends himself kind of well to movies. That said though, I just don't really care. Like, Jim Carrey is back and he looks like he's there for a paycheck, which he straight up admitted that he was. Shadow's as edgy as ever. He's voiced by Keanu Reeves, which is kind of hilarious. You know, they got Idris Elba in there, so the voice cast in this is great. I think it kind of carries the movies for me, but after a while my eyes just kind of glaze over. Like, I mean, they're kids' movies, so what do I expect?
Nice magic marble.
Nosferatu. This one was shot really well. Some of the scenes looked absolutely incredible. They look like a painting. It has a great score. It has a really good atmosphere, but outside of that, it just didn't really click with me. There are some great actors, don't get me wrong. Their performances though are kind of corny. The lead woman's played by Johnny Depp's daughter, and I think she struggles with the period accurate dialogue. I think she comes off as kind of corny and goofy in a lot of the scenes. The overall vibe of the film is just, it's a little bit too horny. It's a very horny movie. It just made me uncomfortable, to be honest with you. Maybe that was the point, I don't know. I enjoyed the spin on the vampire lore, but that really wasn't enough to like save it for me. Maybe 40 minutes could have been cut off of the runtime, and that might have made me like it better. Dear Santa. This is another painfully bland Christmas movie. It's rated PG-13 for some reason, but our main character is 11. The entire film is focused on kids. It really should have just been rated PG, but the movie thinks that it has teeth, and it thinks it's this raunchy comedy, but it really isn't. And there's some mild spoilers here, but at the end of the movie, they break an established rule of the world, which is something that just deeply irks me. Like, if you have a character go out of their way to say something, you can't just break it at the end of the film. It's dumb. I don't know. I just didn't care for the movie. I'm kind of over Jack Black this year. You didn't do me any favors, bud.
Oh, that's putrid.
The Substance. I wasn't sure what was going to be my pick for best movie. This choice will be divisive to say the least, but I think of movies that really stuck in my head this year, and this one kind of comes out on top. Like, The Substance is a great story about the monsters that the entertainment industry creates and how it shames people into doing insane things to remain relevant. This is all told through the lens of straight up body horror. The ending is very excessive and absolutely bonkers, but it drives the point home. I mean, it does go on a little bit longer than it needed to, but overall, I think it's quite creative. It's very well acted, and hey, it's also about being trapped somewhere. So again, this time now we're checking off bodies on the list of things that people were trapped in. Not something that you would bust out for a movie night with your friends, but it's definitely worth watching, even if you just watch it once.
People are gonna love that.
Whew, that was a lot to get through. Those were all the movies that I saw in 2024. There were a couple of films that I had to leave off the list, unfortunately. That's why we didn't get to a true 50 like I would have liked. I'm under NDA, unfortunately, so I'm not able to actually talk about those movies, but let's just say a couple of them are kind of infamous, and maybe one day I'll be able to chat with you guys about it. In the meantime, though, enjoy this little chart here up on the screen. Here's a full ranking of all the films, that way you can see it all in one place. Obviously, we had a lot of bangers this year. The Substance was my favorite, but Wild Robot was really awesome. The Heretic was a great movie. Man, horror was on fire. Speaking of fire, we had Late Night with the Devil. There was just some really cool stuff. Blink Twice, another movie I really enjoyed. And even some of the mediocre ones, you know, they had their moments, like Nosferatu, for example, shot really well. Just like I said, a little too horny for my taste, but you know, everybody's got their own tolerances for certain things. My horny meter's kind of low when it comes to movies. Anyways, thank you so much for watching the video. If y'all made it to the end, please let me know down in the comments what your favorite movie of 2024 is, and I will catch y'all next time.